Hey friends, it's Thursday, August the 1st. It's time for Bible Teaching Thursday. These past several weeks in our, excuse me, Sunday morning worship, we have been in the book of Ephesians. Paul wrote a letter to Ephesus to encourage unity in the church. There was this first century um, conflict or segregation between Jew and Gentile, and part of the early church's job was to heal that and to see people not through their ethnicity, but through the oneness we have in Christ Jesus. And so that's kind of what Ephesians is all about. But like the second half of all Paul's letters, we shift from that theological teaching into the really practical rubber meets the road guidance for our everyday living. And so that's happening right here in the top left. You've got the first three verses of this. I, therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, Paul says. See, I'm a servant to the Lord. Beg you to lead a life worthy of the calling to which you've been called. So, what is a worthy way to live? Well, he lists some familiar virtues here: lowliness or humility, meekness, patience, forbearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace. Okay, remember, there's this emphasis on unity he's really trying to highlight, but that goes for us today as well. When it comes to political differences, differences in how we see the world, I mean, some of these things are legitimate. When we're talking about whether something is completely in God's will or not, we can be pretty dogmatic on that and pretty strict, I suppose. But we should always strive to see even those who disagree with us not as enemies to be pushed against, but as potential people to win over to God's side. And to do that, we're going to need to be patient and forbear with one another for a long time. I mean, maybe you've got a really, really good friend in your life that politically is just diametrically opposed to you. You could write them off. Heck, I've done that before with a few people in my life, and I don't necessarily recommend it, but it happens. Or you can say, I really love this person. We just vehemently disagree on these issues of life, but I'm going to love them through that. And we're going to spar and we're going to go back and forth, but I'm going to try to maintain unity. I'm not going to try not to sabotage a relationship over sometimes what can be a matter of opinion. Again, when we're talking political spectrum, sometimes it descends above opinion or policy and comes down to a moral truth, but not always. And usually, if we're willing to do this, we see the other side as not monsters necessarily, but just people with a different set of assumptions or who view a problem differently. Now, we're still free to disagree with them, but maybe that cuts down on some of the vitriol we have towards them. So anyway, we want this bond of peace, the spirit of unity, and that's going to take hard work on our part. It's going to take overlooking, being patient, not jumping to conclusions. And then look what else is the point of it all. This is kind of the end of this reading. Paul writes, till we all come in the unity of faith, and this is the bottom right, and to the knowledge of the Son of God, unto a perfect man, unto the full measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. In other words, we're works in progress. We haven't yet arrived at true unity, and we never will. But when we ultimately become the perfect people Christ has made us to be, when we achieve the full measure of that, we will have a perfect bond of unity. And in that day will henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine by the sleight of men and the cunning craftiness whereby they lie in wait to deceive. Now, this is a different translation. It's just one I could find an image of that had verses 13 and 14 together. But the point is this: when we don't strive for a bond of unity and peace, we are very prone to being tossed to and fro by the teachings of the world, by the craftiness of men. And you see that in our political spectrum. We run to the extremes, okay? Because we're not striving for a period of unity. Now, each side has their ideology, and instead of sitting somewhere in the middle, we run to that ideology and cling to it and heighten the tension and disagreement between us. So Christians have a unique place to play. I know I'm getting a little political here because it is an election year, and I think I just saw the news the other day. There's 100 days till the election, so it's going to get nasty and more intense, and be people bickering online and with one another about the ideas for what they think is best for our nation. Always stand up for God's will and what you believe in, but don't demonize the other people or the other side too quickly. Because when we do that, we run the risk of being carried away by ideologies which there are limits on both sides of the aisle that we go beyond, and then we find ourselves outside of God's will on either end of the political spectrum. And so that's what can happen if we sell out too wholeheartedly to the ideologies of the world, as opposed to finding a bond of unity together as Christians and as His church. So just a little cautionary tale as we head into the next 100 days. God's peace to you. We'll see you next week with our daily devos, and take care. Have a good weekend, and see you in worship.